All right, folks. So, welcome back for episode number two. This week, I have a chat with Alan Bryden. He is an optometrist and a co-founder of Emerge 21. I came across Alan last year at the Bitcoin Ireland conference where he was talking about his own business and giving his customers the opportunity to pay him in Bitcoin. Since then, he set up Emerge 21 with Chris McLaughlin. He's also got his own hodl eyewear range and he's set up a charitable initiative called Sats for Sight, where he's using Bitcoin to help people around the world, giving them financial and visual inclusivity. So we covered loads of stuff. When he appears, I disappear because problems with Zoom, and then towards the end, we cut it short because my kids crashed into the room. So there's a lot of stuff in there about Bitcoin, the problems of the fiat world, and different things that he's doing to help, and things that you might find interesting. So I'll hand you over to Alan, and hopefully you get something out of it.
Thanks, Connor. First of all, thanks for having me on. It's your second episode, isn't it, as well? So
Yeah.
really privileged to be on at the start of the journey, the podcast journey. So, but yeah, it's great to be here. And like, yeah, my background, I guess, I've been an optometrist now for gosh, 19, just over 19 years. I started my own business about 18 years ago, 2007, back home here in Newton Stewart. And then yeah, just worked as an optician. It's your typical journey. You go to school, university, you're pigeonholed into different categories. You have to pick a subject. You start your career, and you realize after a few years, like, well, yeah, is this really what I want to do? So, but most people, like, you've got your head down, you're working for money, and most people don't understand. I certainly didn't understand what money is or money was. So you're just working and working, but then certain things happen in the grand scheme of things. You've got the great financial crisis, 2008. You've got other things that have been happening more recently as well. And it starts to get you to question things. And I suppose as an optician, as an optometrist, I kind of my attention to detail would be quite good in that I'm like, well, why is this happening? I start to question things and try to diagnose things, I guess. So, but it was only in, I guess, 2020 when COVID hit. Um, I started to question what money was. It's like, well, what is this thing I'm working for? What is money? You're told to invest, you buy property, invest in property, save your money. But then when I started to see what was happening after COVID, where central banks were creating trillions of dollars out of effectively thin air, I started to question things, and that took me down a rabbit hole. But prior to that, so it was 2017. Um, and it was a symptom of being in business and being in a career where I was always looking outside, thinking, well, can I do anything extra? Can I do anything else to make money? Which again is a symptom of the financial system. You're always forced to try to, put your money to work, so to speak. But I was trying to create different revenue streams for myself, for my family. So I went on an online marketing course, business marketing, online business. And I discovered Bitcoin around 2017, which then led me into looking at all these other crypto assets, you could call them potentially. You could call them other things as well. But I didn't understand at the time. You see Bitcoin and you think, well, Bitcoin's, it was quite expensive at the time. I think around then it was what we thought was expensive was around about sort of, $15,000. It had gone on a bit of a bull run from about 3,000. But you see all these other altcoins and all these tokens in the crypto ecosystem. And they were like at cents, maybe 0.02 cents or whatever. And you thought, well, you can have a bit of a bet here, maybe make more money quicker on these things. So I went down that path of testing these other aspects, all these crypto tokens out. Made a lot of mistakes along the way. But over a slow grind over that time, I started to fully understand what Bitcoin was. And it was 2020 was the real linchpin where with this money creation, starting to really understand what money was, what money is, how it's created, how the financial system works, and then also in tangent learning how Bitcoin functions. There was a kind of an epiphany where like, well, Bitcoin is perfected money. It is this, decentralized, open, transparent ledger. That's pretty much what money is. So in understanding what that was and reverting back to what I was doing in my business, I started to kind of go down the Bitcoin rabbit hole and started to really learn about Bitcoin and how Bitcoin is a solution to the financial system and the problems that we have with all these, financial crisis, with COVID, with the money printing that was basically money created out of thin air. And this concept of money creation, it's devaluing everybody else's money. It's diluting the money in the economic system. So anybody that's saving money, this thing we're told to do, save your money, put your money aside, you're actually losing value. Like over a period of 10 years, you'll lose 50% of the economic energy or the value, your purchasing power of your money. So it begs the question, why do we save money at the end of the day? And then that asks, you beg the question of what is money? Like you ask yourself, what is money? So when you kind of marry all that together, which is a bit of a long-winded journey from 2017 through to today, when you start to understand Bitcoin as I did, I wanted to really integrate Bitcoin into as many aspects of my business, my life as possible. Um, and that's a deeper conversation. It's something that you need to really spend time on. I guess it's looking at things from first principles. That was the key concept. It's really breaking everything down to a base level and asking the question, why is this? What is that? How does that work? Well, why is it that money is created out of thin air? How is that a thing? Because it's basically a debt-based system. So all these questions and all these solutions that are coming on board now with Bitcoin, what Bitcoin is, and for me, it is the absolute solution to the broken financial system that we have. And that allows us to put our really hard work, our time and energy, all this time we spend working into a vehicle or an asset class that cannot be debased, that can't be seized from you, that basically is available to everyone. But most people still conventionally think you put money in the stock market, money into property. But when you start to see the kind of the failure points of these other assets, and compare that to Bitcoin as well, you come to realize Bitcoin is really, it's as Michael Saylor says, there is no second best, but it's a journey to get there. And if you're at the very start of that journey, it can be a bit of a process. And when you hear people like yourself and myself talking about this kind of stuff, at the outset, you might think we're crazy, which a lot of people do. A lot of family members still do. A lot of my friends still do. You get that weird look. But ultimately, when you've got the conviction and you've convinced yourself enough that this is the solution to many of the world's problems, so to speak. But yeah, so yes, I'm still working as an optician. In the opticians, I work currently roughly 2.5 days a week testing. So I've actually, again, because it's a Bitcoin mindset thing as well, which we can go off in that conversation. It really puts your life into perspective in a way. It focuses your time and like it makes you more efficient with your time, I guess, with your work-life balance. You start to look outside your work. You start to look at your life, your health choices, your life choices. And it's got a very kind of it's like an octopus in a way. It branches out into many other aspects of your life
Mm.
from a philosophical point of view. But yeah, so then obviously with the obsessions, with where I'm at currently in my business, I'm growing. You mentioned Huddle Eyewear, which again is bringing Bitcoin. I ask myself the question, how do I bring Bitcoin into my work, into my business? And I can't just go and call myself, Bitcoin optometrist, put it above the door. It'll scare people off. People will literally run a mile because most people's perceptions of Bitcoin is, it's a scam, it's a Ponzi scheme, primarily because they get their information from mainstream media and they group Bitcoin with the rest of the crypto space, which is pretty much what everybody does at the start. But it's going through the process and listening to again podcasts like what you're doing, Connor, here, and listening to other Bitcoiners that have come on the journey, that have made the mistakes, and that have realized, well, Bitcoin is a completely different animal to the rest of crypto. And you'll hear these buzzwords and these terms banged around as what we're seeing with the Trump administration, what they're doing. There's a lot of talk about crypto, a lot of talk about different tokens and coins, CBDCs. There's lots of information in the space, but it's for me, it's finding that signal in the noise. Bitcoin is the signal to really focus on, and it's really integrating that with your life, with your business, and it's pretty much what I'm trying to do at the moment. And it's a process. You'll never become an expert on Bitcoin, but it's a learning process, and it shapes your whole worldview as you go. So yeah, that was a bit of a long-winded journey into kind of where I'm at, but hope it made some sort
No,
of sense.
that's brilliant. You covered loads of stuff there, and I suppose like for me, when I came to Bitcoin, so the way I came to Bitcoin, I actually said this in the last episode. The way I came was through stocks and shares. And have you heard of the whole FIRE movement, financial independence, retire early? You heard of that?
I haven't,
Well,
no.
well, basically, it was this movement where people were sort of educating themselves on the financial system and using things like, like ISAs, where you could get, use a savings vehicle that gives you basically a tax break or whatever. So you could invest in the stocks and shares. And the idea was you would invest in the stocks and shares using an index fund, sort of just put your money in there and they'll put it wherever the S&P 500 or whatever. So put it in there and accumulate money, and then at the end of that, maybe 30 years whatever, you would have a pot
of money sitting there that would be um you'd have a certain amount of interest, and you could just skim the interest off the top, and it's kind of like the golden, the goose with the golden egg. It's just it keeps laying and laying. So that's what I was doing. And then the person that was sort of teaching me about this stuff had mentioned Bitcoin. They were saying, some investors, so like people like Warren Buffett were like my idols at that time. I was like trying to copy what they did. And this person was saying that, some of these top investors are now putting 1% of Bitcoin in their portfolio. And I was like, but your Bitcoin's a scam. Why would you do that? Why are these like intelligent and wealthy people that I've sort of been following their direction? Why are they messing with this Bitcoin? Because we've already got the plan to get us, where we want to go. And so that was my introduction. I'd heard about it before, but that was really what put it in front of me again. And then a friend of mine had shared something that Denny Collins had done. So I found his page on Facebook and started to look at Bitcoin again and looked at it in detail, trying to disprove it, trying to prove that it was a scam, because I had spent time learning about, the f these stocks and shares and different financial tools. And what he was saying was that none of these things work anymore because of inflation, and that none of these things were actually keeping up with inflation. And I was like, that can't be true, because if that's true, then this whole plan that I've laid out and this work that I've done has been a waste. So I really wanted Bitcoin not to be, I really wanted it not to work and for it to be a scam and everything he was saying not to be true. But I just opened my mind, and I looked at it honestly, and I found out that, Bitcoin was digital gold and it was perfect money, and that the financial system that we had was basically a scam. It was completely flawed, and like it was a huge, huge problem that was taking purchasing power away from people. It was keeping people poor, and it was unfair. So that's how I came to Bitcoin. But I think like the more I looked at Bitcoin, once I had that, I'd accepted that this financial system and what I had learned about the financial system was all lies. Then it made me realize, what else have,
Yeah.
centralized media or whatever. So I never really trusted the media or anything, but now I'd learned that the financial system was also a scam. They'd been lying to me about that. So what else were they lying to me about? And that brought me into the different roads of, nutrition and fitness and everything. I was like, what else are they lying to me about? So it's taken me on a journey, looking at all that different stuff. And um, like you said, you're never an expert in this thing. Every time you sort of look at it and you connect with other Bitcoiners and you hear what they're doing. So, some people might be working solely in money and using Bitcoin as a financial tool, or some people are using it as a way to decentralize health, or, some people are coaching kids football and they're doing it through Bitcoin. Or um, I think in this part of the world, we come to Bitcoin as sort of an investment, don't we? And we try to, the number go up type of thing. But in other parts of the world, like South America and Africa, they're actually using it as a medium of exchange. So people are actually getting paid in Bitcoin and they're spending Bitcoin. And I suppose the first time that I'd ever heard of, people actually spending Bitcoin here was when you had done your talk and said that you were allowing people to purchase or to spend their Bitcoin with you. Because up until that moment, I didn't know anybody. I didn't know it was possible in this country for people to actually spend their Bitcoin, and it kind of perked my ear up. Um, and it said to you as well, this past while I've been trying to educate people or orange pill them on the the different aspects of Bitcoin. So it being sound money and that it can't be corrupted and it's immutable, and also it's the best performing asset that we've ever had. And I'm trying to tell people this, but people my age and people younger especially, they don't really care that Bitcoin is the best tool for savings. They don't really care that it's the best performing asset, because they don't have a mindset where they're thinking about saving, because they're just struggling paycheck to paycheck. And of that short time frame mindset. Um, so I think with um with doing things like allowing people to get their eyes tested and spend Bitcoin, like what I wanted to do more recently was to create a sort of ecosystem for myself where I can go to a barber's and spend Bitcoin, or go to a butcher's and spend Bitcoin, and through other customers, my butcher and my hairdresser will say to me, "Do you want to use cash, card, or Bitcoin?" And when I say Bitcoin, hopefully other customers are going to say, "Did he just pay with Bitcoin?" And that's going to, spike their interest, or whatever. And then hopefully get them to start using it, maybe. And then once they start using it, they'll start to realize how valuable it is. So, um, it's re it's really you can come at this from all sort of angles, But with the HODL eyewear, there's also something that really was interesting to me, the Sats for Sight initiative. So do you want to tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, like again, I think it was everything kind of happened at once last year where, and funny you mentioned as well, decentralized healthcare. I've been working on something with a couple of other guys on Noster as well around that. So that's interesting as well. But with HODL eyewear, and Sats for Sight. It was basically, I was looking at, again, it all ties in, it ties back to Bitcoin as well. I was looking at the fact there's like over 2 billion people, like 2 billion people in the world that can't get access to eye care services. And I think of those, about 1.3 billion of those people, all they need is a simple pair of glasses to allow them to see. But because they can't get access, because there's certain regulations in certain countries, it's mainly in the global south. These people, literally, their quality of life is not there. They can't, go out and earn a living simply because they can't see. So I was at a conference. It was the UK Bitcoin conference in Edinburgh. This was 2022, November 22, I think it was. And there was a charity there called Charity Water. They're a big global water charity. They dig wells in Africa, but they had a Bitcoin water trust, and it was basically a trust started. I think the Winklevoss twins, basically, if they got when they got to 50 Bitcoin, they were going to match that, in which they did. There's over 100 something Bitcoin in the trust currently.
Mhm.
So there's some big investors. There's Tony Hawk. There's Winklevoss twins. They donated 25 Bitcoin each. Peter McCormick's a donator as well. There's other people, but that sort of got my wheels, the cogs turning in my brain, thinking, well, could you do something like this within the eyewear charities as well? And there's quite a lot of eyewear charities across the globe. But again, it's trying to break that barrier of the Bitcoin thing. It's like getting past having conversations with these charities, and you've got the gatekeepers, and there's a whole financial regulation in place. Whereas Bitcoin's designed as open source, transparent money, it's a transparent ledger. And my thinking was, well, setting up an eyewear brand with the ethos of Bitcoin, which was the Huddle eyewear brand, which is currently still I'm still developing it. I've got the original range itself was confined to my own practice, but now I'm launching a blocking range online in the coming months, so that should be out within sort of May, June, July time. But thinking around that, getting people potentially targeting that towards Bitcoiners, potentially and hopefully getting people to spend their sats, spend in Bitcoin, buy the frames, and then take a portion of that, of every sale, take a portion of that and put it into an eyewear trust called Sats for Sight to effectively do a similar thing to what the Water Trust are doing for digging wells, but developing a trust that's going to build up a Bitcoin cash pile for providing eye care, eyewear services to people within the global south potentially. And these generally, as I say, the link to Bitcoin here is very strong in that most of these people are unbanked. So there's is it something like 3.5 billion people they don't have access to bank accounts, they don't have access to the financial system. They're in poverty, whereas Bitcoin brings this element of hope to their lives, where they can actually, have ownership and have some form of dignity in their lives and themselves to actually generate wealth for themselves, for their family. So I think an issue with the current system, the broken system, it's a system of extraction globally. And again, you go down a deep rabbit hole on that, how the system works, how it functions. But most of the economic value, most of the wealth we have in the Western world is due to extraction from these other countries, from extraction through resources, through IMF funds that are, stripping wealth from the population through inflation. And inflation is a term that most people have heard about, but their exposure to inflation is more to do with the CPI, Customer Price Index, which you see broadcast on mainstream media at like 2%, 3%, things like that. That's the target's 2%, but there shouldn't be inflation. We shouldn't have inflation in the monetary system. It's a stealth tax. It's another tax basically on the population. It ruins many, many lives. And we're seeing that with cost of living currently in the West, but it's impacting more and more people in the global South. And like their inflation rates, double, triple digits in many respects, whereas here we're lucky that it's generally under 10% potentially, but the real inflation rate ties back to the money supply. Again, when you understand it's what's called the MT money supply, the money that's created throughout the year effectively, that's the rate of inflation, that's true inflation. But it's this concept of how that impacts on the global economy. What's the solution? What is a tool that the global populace, the people within like the grassroots movements, these people on the ground, like people like you and me, what can we do to stand up as opposed to trying to trust a politician to come along, spend 4 years doing things that's in their best interest, aren't really in the interest of everybody else. But we've got a tool now. Each individual has this tool called Bitcoin where we can go and, save in money that we own, save in money that is appreciating in value over time. If you're if you're comparing this appreciation to like the dollar or the pound or the euro, everything, falls in price against Bitcoin. You look at again what you said, it's the best performing asset over the last 10, well, 15 years, basically, if you want to break it down. But if you look at effectively house prices, like houses are that key vehicle of investment for people. You can look at house prices and compare what Bitcoin is, the value of Bitcoin and house prices over the course of the last, say, 10 years. It's quite staggering. Even looking at what was 2016, I think this was in my presentation down south in Dublin, the Bitcoin conference. It was 2017 or 2016. My house itself, an average house, say in Ireland or UK, would have cost around, I think it was 67 Bitcoin. And then 2020, it was around about 27 Bitcoin. Whereas if you look at today, 2024, 2025, you're talking around about three, maybe 2.5 Bitcoin for an average house valuation.
Mm.
And when you actually look at the world in Bitcoin terms, it really does change your view on how everything functions, how everything works, and how you look at your ability and the tool that's there to preserve your wealth going forward. And that's again with Sats for Sight, allowing people to save in Sats, like this is Bitcoin's, units. There's 100 million Sats in a Bitcoin. And if people in the global south get access to being able to, use sats, save in sats, and as you say, there are circular economies set up in various parts of the world, mainly in these poor economies, like even Peru, and different parts in Nigeria as well, that they're spending sats, they're spending Bitcoin, they're using Bitcoin as their monetary system, and it's saved a lot of people, and it's allowed a lot of people to be able to generate wealth for themselves in their, chosen economies and local economies. So having integrating Bitcoin into a business structure in that you're developing different systems, different processes, different ways to help other people out, which is basically what I'm trying to do with this eyewear Sats for Sight thing. Um, I feel it's something that I wouldn't have been able to do prior to understanding Bitcoin or prior to Bitcoin coming along. And then as a business as well, being able to take your cash or a portion of your cash balance and actually put that on your balance sheet as Bitcoin, let it sit there as Bitcoin, effectively hold Bitcoin on your balance sheet. That's a game changer as well. Like you wouldn't have had this, 15 years ago. It wasn't possible. So you now have a tool in your arsenal that nobody can tell you not to use, that you can go and use in your personal life, in your business life. If you have a charity, you can use it in your charity to grow that, that pot of money. If you want to focus the money in terms of dollars or euros or pounds, then that will grow exponentially over time. And the proof is there. Like you can fact check this. You can go to Charity Water, go to the Bitcoin Trust, type it into Google, it'll come up. You'll see what that value of that Bitcoin's worth. And if you compare that to say, 2 or 3 years ago, it's grown by over, potentially 100 120, 150%. There's not one other asset on this planet that does that or has done that.
No.
And all these companies and organizations and individuals, Keely, that's available for you now. So yeah, that's basically
Yeah.
the power of what Bitcoin is.
Like, I was just thinking there that, obviously, if people, want to give to charities, traditionally, if they want to give to charities or they want to do a good deed or whatever, like more recent times, some people have grown wary of the big charities because, you've somebody at the top and they're getting paid a massive salary. And you think, well, what's the point in me giving money to this charity and it's just going on their salary? And then on the other end of that, so if you're in maybe some of those, um, poorer nations, there's a lot of corruption and then there's inflation. So people think, well, what's the point in giving the charity? Like, how far is that actually going? Who am I actually helping? But like the thing with Bitcoin that's great is Like me or you can literally send value or a Satoshi or a small amount of Bitcoin from here to any place on the planet, anywhere on the planet, and nobody will stop us and say, why you send that to them or who you sending that to. Nobody can stop it. There's no middleman, and that's like that might just be a small thing that people might even overlook. But if you look at it in, the wider picture, if you zoom out on that, that's a massively powerful thing to be able to do is just, to choose where you're going to send your money and to do it instantly without anybody being able to interfere with it. Um, it's an amazing tool. And you were just talking there about small businesses. Like in my local shopping center, I was walking through it last week, and there's always a few units that are closed down or empty or whatever, and it's just normal, isn't it? It's just a part of life when businesses come and go. But there was like seven, I seen seven in a row that were just empty, and I kept poking my wife saying, what? There's another one, there's another one," and she was like, "Yeah, whatever." But for me, it was like this has reached a new level now. This has gotten to another level. And it kind of made me think back to 2008 because I remember at that time it was a massive shock to the world. And, there was, so many people lost so much in houses and businesses. And they're just, people weren't even able to work or to get jobs. And um, it just sort of reminded me of that. And I was thinking, like when I was learning about, what money was, I did it through Mike Maloney's TV show, the documentary, The Hidden Secrets of Money. And on there, although he was kind of advocating for people to use gold as their money, um, he was talking about this what was coming down the line, this great wealth transfer, and he basically said that if we don't use gold or figure out a way to save our money, that all the past would be repeated basically. And he was talking about all the great financial crashes that happened in the past. And when I was in the shopping center, I was thinking, 2008 is probably just a little hiccup in what's to come. If the current financial situation is allowed to go the way it's going, and wealth is being extracted from people and people are getting squeezed more and more. And the people that kind of the people that kind of feel that the most, I think, at the moment is obviously me and you, people on the street, but businesses, because businesses are very, very wary of putting their price up, even though that's what they should be doing, for the most part. Um, I even heard a guy the other day. He worked in a restaurant and he was trying to explain to somebody that the price of I think it was steak or something had gone up, and they were trying to figure out a way to spread this cost across all the items in the restaurant because they couldn't just put the price of this up. And that's probably a conversation that's going on in a lot of businesses. How do we navigate this where we don't pass the extra cost on to the customer because people are afraid to put the prices up and they lose customers. So it's very, very hard for small businesses, I think, to deal with the current financial climate. And one way that they can navigate it is obviously to learn about Bitcoin. But they're so busy, they're caught up in the wheel of life or whatever, and trying to keep afloat that they don't have time to look at it. Um, so I think a great way for people, in our local area is to go into stores and say, that's what I'm planning doing is ask people, can I spend my Bitcoin here? Like you're doing, letting customers spend their Bitcoin, and then open up the conversation and hopefully they'll be able to, just if you just offer them another way, hopefully they'll take you up on the offer. And look, I'd be willing to sit down with anybody for an hour and explain to them how Bitcoin could improve their business, or improve their life. So I suppose it's uh it's something it's really it's something that's really great that you're doing. Um
It is, it's tricky. It's, again, I think the problem I have too is, and probably everybody and yourself, Connor, it's like you learn about Bitcoin and you realize what the problem is. You realize, the money system's broken. The money system, because it's broken, it's got a knock-on effect into society. It's probably one of the major causes of many of the world's problems. And then you want to go and tell as many people as possible about it. And you want to try to, shout it from the rooftops. But the majority of people, as you say, are busy. They're busy trying to put food on the table. They're busy trying to pay their bills. And they don't have the headspace, or you've got kids running about crazy, yourself. It's just you don't have the headspace to focus in on something. And Bitcoin is complex to understand. It takes time. You can't, you could explain Bitcoin to someone in an hour, but ultimately they're going to have, 100% trust in what you say, and they're going to have to like really take in everything that you've said in that hour period. But most people don't. Like most people need a lot of touch points to understand certain simple concepts. But Bitcoin's got a multitude of different aspects to it, and it then filters into other things as well. So I think it's just most people they get their eyes open when they actually take the understanding that the money system is broken, when they understand why it's broken, what the problem is, and then when they grasp the fact that Bitcoin is the solution. It's difficult because it's a new paradigm. It's not something that we can say, well, we've had this in the past, so this is how it's evolved. This is a completely new system, a parallel system to what we're used to. We've been brought up in this fiat experiment, fiat money, money that is mandated by the government, money that is not backed by anything. There's nothing of value backing the money apart from, trust in the fact that the government or the central banks will create more money and that will pay it off in the future. So it's just it's a debt-based Ponzi scheme. Like that's what it is. Let's call it out for what it is. Whereas we need a hard asset. And as you mentioned, like gold has been historically for 6,000 years, the hardest kind of financial monetary asset that we've had. Like the inflation rate of gold is maybe 1.52% being mined from the earth every year. Whereas Bitcoin is the only fixed supply asset that we've ever had in the history of humanity. Because it's in cyberspace, because it's digital, it's not physical, people find it difficult to get their head around that. But ultimately, when they understand Bitcoin being brought into existence is tied to the physical world, and that miners have to mine it using electricity, they have to, expend money to do that. So it's tied to physics, it's tied to nature. And again, it takes a little bit of time to get to that point of understanding. But once it starts to click, it does, as I mentioned and said before, it gets you looking at things very differently. But small businesses, they are struggling. Like, I talk to business owners quite regularly. And that's one of my key reasons for starting. Again, I co-founded Emerge 21, which it's really to try to accelerate people's understanding of Bitcoin. So we're trying to find ways of really, speeding up the process of getting people to know, business owners to understand what Bitcoin is and really trying to implement that into their lives as soon as possible because this is the life raft that we need. Like what's coming and what is coming, potentially this year, 2025, 26 onwards, um, things are changing rapidly and people just aren't aware, mainly from the point of view that they haven't taken the time to understand what the problem is and that money is broken. It's not actual money in the context of what real money is. And when things change so quickly, people that don't have Bitcoin, people that haven't spent the time understanding Bitcoin are going to find it really, really difficult. I think it's hard now, but I think it's going to get a lot worse. And for businesses, especially small businesses, yes, the way the world is working, the way the financial system's structured, it's created that it forms larger organizations. It gets, it really causes, big organizations to thrive because they can create products and things for cheaper prices, whereas small independent businesses, their costs are higher and they're getting higher and higher. As you say, they have to put the prices up to cover their overheads, to pay their bills, but it's getting unsustainable. And as you say, from the high street, you see the amount of places that are closed. Like I walk down my high street here, walk down any high street, there's probably at least 25, 30% of the shops not open currently. So yeah, it's strange times, but again, I think again, I'd done a video the other day. I hadn't posted it because it went on for 9 minutes. I just started talking to the phone about what was happening, but I think I'll post it. I'll post it out after this and just see what people say, mainly to my friends and family. But it's time to really, things are serious. It's time to really take note of what's happening
Mm.
and really find that, take the time to understand Bitcoin. That's the key message. It's a simple message, but it takes a little bit of time and energy to do it. But there's
Yeah.
resources there. There's things there that you can look at and you can watch, you can listen to that will speed up that process.
Yeah, actually, I think when I came across you in the beginning, you had a video, I think it was on YouTube or maybe on Instagram, and you'd said that you'd just started your own podcast actually, and you'd said that you pretty much had to do it because your wife was sick of you just talking about Bitcoin. You're kind of talking to her, talking at her about Bitcoin, and at that exact moment, I was kind of in the same situation where I had been talking to my wife and my friends and stuff about Bitcoin a bit, but at that moment, I kind of felt like it just it kind of was like a bit of a crisis. I was in crisis mode. I was like, I have all this information in my head that I've gathered, and I feel that it's so important. And I suppose at the time my kids were very very young, and I thought I would hate for something to happen to me and not to be able to pass this information on to my kids. Because if it wasn't for me, if not for me, they probably will never pick this up, or my wife. And so I just had this overwhelming feeling that I need to get this information out and tell people. But when you start, you can't really just go around and start shouting at your friends or making videos and telling people, shouting about Bitcoin because, like you said, like there's the whole crypto aspect, and obviously Bitcoin was the first crypto, but the whole crypto space, what it's become, has nothing to do with Bitcoin. And so I find that a lot of people who I would t talk to would know about Bitcoin or would know about crypto and would, if I'm talking about Bitcoin, they associate me with the whole crypto bros, running around with a Rolex and a Lambo. And they think, well, if you don't have your Rolex and you don't have your Lambo, how can you talk to me about money? And a lot of them, if I say to them, "Well, you don't even know what money is, you probably don't because I didn't." And most people don't know what money is. They think they know what money is and they'll work their whole life for it, but they actually don't know what money is. And if I say that to somebody, like you said, you'd get a few strange looks, wouldn't you? Um,
You're
so
rude. That's the thing. I
yeah,
think come across arrogant or yeah, rude.
yeah, it's very like it's how, and especially in this country, people don't really like talking about money at all.
You know,
And it can be, I heard somebody saying that sometimes being a Bitcoiner is like, you have this cross that you have to bear, whereas you're sort of carrying this around and for me especially, I wanted to tell my friends and family about Bitcoin because I knew that if they saved in Bitcoin, they could improve their financial situation, they'd have a bit more freedom and a bit more hope because that's what it gave me. I had less stress about the future and less stress about money, and it was more hopeful. And I just wanted to give them a piece of that, and that's why I was trying to talk to them in the beginning. But now, like you said, I see it being more important to tell them about what's coming. You talked about central bank digital currencies and all there as well, and the European banker central bank are talking about rolling that out in 2025. And you can't go telling people about that either because then you're called a conspiracy theorist and all. But all these things are there for people to learn, and you said it's going to be a very very long journey for people to understand all of this stuff, and it's going to take years. We say that learning about Bitcoin, it's kind of an apprenticeship, isn't it? It takes 4 years because you have that 4 year cycle before you really trust it. Um, but I think people should really just if they're if they're not going to look at what money is and how it's broken, they should just start to use Bitcoin in any small way that they can. Um, and then hopefully through that they can, start to learn a bit more about it. Because I used to say to people, read a book, listen to a podcast, and learn what this thing is, and then go and buy some. But now I'm at the stage where I'm like, this is so important. You need to just buy some. You need to just get some, have some, get off zero. And then when you have it, then take your time and start to learn about it. But the main thing is that you need to have some. And it's like, it's so important that people do that because for me, Bitcoin is freedom. And if you don't have Bitcoin, all your freedoms are slowly being stripped away from you, because if the central bank digital currency comes in and we don't have a way, for monies being, if they can turn our money on and off or decide how we spend our money, then you're basically just a slave, aren't you? And then if you look at it in terms of food, we see that, the quality of the money goes down and the quality of everything else goes down. So your foods, um, the quality of the food goes down and the quality of people's living goes down. And I was thinking about it the other day, like everything great in life has sort of been built off the back of sound money. So if you look at even like architecture and great pieces of art, they couldn't be made today because there's no mechanism for people to, work and save their energy, save their time, and then to build on that and to build on it until they have a big enough pot to do something. So you see, I, like I think everything in life, the quality is going down, and it all roots back to, the broken money system, and people are caught up in that. It's kind of like second class living, isn't it? People are just they're all fed up. They know that something's not quite right, but they can't put their finger on it. And I'm not going to come out and shout and say, oh, Bitcoin, it's not going to go down too well. So it's hard to know something and to know that you can help somebody and to be humble at the same time, or to come across as humble because it's people kind of react to that and think, oh, who are you to talk to me about money or Bitcoin or, I don't need to hear this. But you do need to hear it. People do need to hear it. So like this isn't my natural comfort zone or whatever, talking to people on a camera, on the internet. Like it's not, but I just feel like it's something that's so strong within me now that I have to do something. I have to do something. And I'm kind of hopeful that my kids will learn enough about it and they'll be able to go to school and teach their friends and they'll be using the terminology, and the next generation that comes after us will probably they will have the opportunity to flourish like no other generation has ever done before. And it's through me just having a conversation with you and you doing your thing with Emerge 21. And if we don't do these things, because Bitcoin is a grassroots movement, it is from the bottom up. Nobody's coming to save us. We have to do it ourselves. By us just doing this, we're giving the next generation the opportunity of a better life. But if we don't do it, the opposite is in store for them. It could be this dystopian world, and people people just don't I don't think they can grasp it. The idea of it is too big. Either that Bitcoin is so good that's too big, or that if they don't adopt Bitcoin, the world could be, measurably less worth being around for.
I think it is true. Like people look at it like, oh, it's too good. It's always like too good to be true. It's like this thing. There must be some kind of kind of strange thing behind it, or something's not going to work, or something's going to break. But as you say, like, and I would like I've encouraged everybody to do approach Bitcoin from the point of view as a skeptic, and just don't even try to break it, try to make it not work. Try to really go down that rabbit hole and say, well, it's not going to work because of this. Thousands upon thousands of people have done this before you, but do it for yourself. But that is the main driver, and for me is my children. It is what is the world going to look like if Bitcoin is not part of that world? And you mentioned that word hope. Like 2020, when COVID hit and I was closed for 3.5 months, there was no hope. It's like, well, what's going to happen here? Like, where am I going to, put whatever money I may have, or where am I going to create more money from? Like, how am I going to, generate that income? Um, there was no savings vehicle. There was no way of beating inflation because inflation went through the roof. It was bloody, what, 23, 26% or something silly like that. Maybe more, could be 40% during COVID. But it was like, yeah, what do you do? Where do you go with that? But it's vital now. It's at the point where the financial system is like the amount of debt in the system is, it's unserviceable. It's insolvent. The system is basically insolvent. It's like there's 400 trillion worth of debt in the world, 900 trillion worth of assets, something along those lines. So the system is effectively insolvent. But for your future, for your children's future, and those children, the generations to come, Bitcoin is that, multiple thousand of years, generational, multi-generational tool to allow you to, create freedom for your family, for yourself, for your future, to have something that's going to give you the ability to go and, save your own money, spend your own money as you wish, and live a life that's not, a hamster in a hamster wheel, servicing, being a debt slave constantly, because most people are trying to survive. They're in survival mode. They're working to earn money to pay their bills, pay their, to keep their kids food on the table. And it's not a way to live. You're literally a debt slave. And there's a lot of different books, Safedin, there's a lot of books out. The term debt slavery, when I saw it, I was like, that's a bit strong, is it? But once you actually understand, again, what's going on, you're literally a debt slave. And people, going and taking out stupid mortgages, large mortgages on houses. I was talking to a estate agent yesterday, and he was saying most young people coming along now, most people buying houses or buying their second house, says they're not really looking at that final figure of what the house is worth. They're just going and looking at the monthly payments. It's like, well, I've got maybe a pay rise this year, and I can afford an extra £200 a month. so I'm going to go into a bigger house because I've got this little bit of money extra to pay my mortgage. It's like, well, again, people aren't, they're not thinking the bigger picture. They're on a small, short-term thinking as opposed to that kind of long-term time horizon where they need to plan for the future. But again, Bitcoin is that tool to allow you to do that. And yeah, again, it's such a complex web of different financial things that are happening at the moment. But simplify it. Just literally, Bitcoin allows you, gives you the time to sit back and just simplify your life. And it is, as you say, the best performing asset. And in my mind, and I think a lot of people's minds, it will be continue to be the only and the best performing asset, the apex asset of our generation, but also of our kids and their kids' generations to come as well, purely because of the fact it is a protocol, it is decentralized, it is ossifying and hardening year on year on year, and it can't be broken. It's too big now. It's the world's largest supercomputer, decentralized supercomputer, effectively. It would cost far too much to hack that, to break it. You simply can't. The amount of infrastructure required to do that is just not possible in the current state, and it will continue to grow. And with network effects and with more and more people getting on the network using Bitcoin, and as you say, hopefully now starting to spend Bitcoin as well, and you're doing the right thing. If you, and I, again, would encourage everybody in the space, everybody that's a Bitcoiner, if you go to your shop, go to your coffee shop, go to your barber, just ask that simple question: Do you accept Bitcoin? Just plant the seed.
Hmm.
Um, See what happens, see what response you get. It can be a wee bit daunting. And me, again, in my business, as you say, I accept Bitcoin for an eye test for glasses. If anybody wants to pay me in Bitcoin, please come to me, pay me in Bitcoin. But ultimately, it's difficult, and it only took me probably this year. And I think it's because Bitcoin's become more mainstream. It's become more accepted. Like you've got these institutions putting it on their balance sheets, ETFs, there's these banks and central banks actually taking Bitcoin and holding Bitcoin now as well. But for the general public, as a business owner, I was always very hesitant to talk about it openly in the past to my customers. Like I had the sign up in the background. If somebody asked me a question about it, I would explain why I accept it. But I'm at the point now where I'm talking about it more. I'm openly broadcasting on an email, thread or an email list to my local list that, I'm openly accepting Bitcoin, why I'm doing hodl eyewear, talk about Sats for Sight, why I'm developing that, why I want that to be a thing in the future. So it's just planting these seeds and openly talking about it. And the more conversations we can have, the more people talking about it. As you say, it's a grassroots movement from well, it's coming from both. It's coming from grassroots, but it's also coming from a top down now as well. But I think
Hmm.
the more powerful concept is moving from the grassroots up, and that's what Bitcoin is, what Bitcoin's for. So the more people that, as you say, can have even just a few sats in a wallet, hold it, watch it, see what happens to it, having that interaction with it and seeing how it functions, that's the most powerful way of getting adoption locally and beyond that. But it does take a little bit of time, energy, and perseverance to get
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
What you're doing, from what I'm
It's
doing, and what I'm again doing with Chris on Emerge 21 as well.
yeah, like for me, like always said that to my friends and stuff, I would say like Bitcoin is a revolution. And it really is. Like, you can say that maybe flippantly, but if you sit down and you look at all the things that it improves in life and the power it gives back to the individual person, and you're able to take power away from those centralized institutions, the banks and governments and all, like it really is a revolution that's happening right now, isn't it?
Well,
Um,
sorry for jumping in, but it's the first time in history that you, as an individual, have the opportunity to individually choose what you do with your money.
mm,
Prior to that, you had to go through, as you say, middlemen, third parties, banks. You put your money in the bank. Most people don't understand. That's not your money anymore. The bank is leaving ownership of that money. And the money's not even there. Once it doesn't even exist in a vault. A lot of people have that perception that there's a vault with some form of money, some amount of money sitting there, and that you go and get a mortgage. The bank has to give you this money from their vault. But you create a mortgage, they create money out of thin air. That money doesn't even exist. But a lot of people don't realize that, and you're paying back that principal plus the interest on that from
yeah,
something that's created out of nothing. So it's actually it's in a way beyond belief how the system works. That's why it takes a while. It breaks your brain, and that
yeah,
how is this even possible that this system functions like this? and has done for so long. And as you say, the power of Bitcoin, stripping that away, that power that currently exists and is centralized with central banks, they have the power to create money out of thin air that devalues your money. Having this now where we need to break that, the system needs to be broken, it needs to be broken up. Like a small group of people basically decide what happens to the money. And like it's a silly thing. It really is. When you boil down to basic first principles thinking, it makes no sense. And when
Yeah.
you realize again what Bitcoin is, it makes perfect sense. Um, and like all in a way, all Bitcoin is, it's neutral money. You have money that forces the free market to function because of the fact it's fixed finite supply. The free market has to work. It has to function. You have to like provide something of value to someone in order to, extract that money, that Bitcoin back in
Mhm.
return. Because money is 50% of every trade, so to speak, or every transaction. So, Bitcoin itself has that element of honesty, transparency and openness. And anybody can verify that on the blockchain, on the Bitcoin, time chain. Um, they're timestamp transactions that cannot be reversed. And we've never had that in the past. And that's the problem again with all this other crypto stuff. Like Bitcoin is the only truly decentralized, cryptocurrency. It is the original. All these other cryptos are copycats of what Bitcoin is, but they all have a centralized, company or individual or some kind of entity that controls or
Mhm.
markets the coin, the token. Bitcoin doesn't have a marketing company. Bitcoin doesn't have a CEO. It's basically this grassroots movement built on this protocol that is the protocol for money. And it is something when it's kind of very you can get very spiritual about it also. You can get very kind of philosophical around it, but it pulls in all these other aspects of life. Um, and again, when you talk to someone, you have to meet everybody, you have to meet them where they're at in their life and their journey. People are from different age brackets or at different parts in their life. Somebody in their 60s or 70s, they've worked, they've, had a steady job, they've got a pension, they're comfortable. They don't really need Bitcoin. They don't pay it attention. You talk to like, for instance, my father or my father-in-law, potentially they don't really need to spend the time thinking about it. But then when you bring in the angle of, well, there's your grandchildren and their children, what's their future going to look like? They might stop and think, well, hold on a second, yeah, money, how money works, get an understanding of that. Maybe this Bitcoin thing is something I should pay attention to. So there's different ways and different angles to approach Bitcoin, and there's many, many hundreds, potentially thousands of different angles to approach it, which is why it's
Yeah.
so difficult to actually get to that
Yeah.
that level at a first point of contact with someone. But no, it's essential, and it's basically just something we need more and more people talking about. But it's
Yeah.
happening. Like the adoption is growing. There's different conferences happening across the globe. There's meetups, local meetups, national meetups, international meetups. Yeah, it's people are growing in the space, and I would highly, it's one thing I would encourage somebody and everybody to actually try to attend a Bitcoin event, a Bitcoin meetup, or a Bitcoin conference because any of these conferences I've been to that are Bitcoin specific, um, you very rarely hear them talk about the price. It's more
Yeah.
about what it does for humanity, what it does for society. There's a bigger worldview happening here where we're trying to make the world better for everybody. And that's why it's such a beautiful thing. It is really something that's really going to advance society, advance humanity forward, because that will not happen in the current system. The current system's so fractured, so fraudulent, so manipulated, so broken. There's no honesty left there. Whereas you come to Bitcoin, Bitcoin is a truth system, and that's effectively what it is. And that's what humanity needs going forward. So, yeah, not sure how I got to that
Bit, bit, yeah, Bitcoin is the ultimate truth for me. Like it is the only thing that you can say is absolutely true, and that's way down the rabbit hole for people. But there's no deceit. You can't deceive Bitcoin. Bitcoin can't deceive you. Like everything, every transaction is there on the chain. Nothing can be changed. Like even to the point where like I see Bitcoin or the net. We've got Bitcoin the token and Bitcoin the network or whatever. But like I can see that network being used. I think it was already used in the American elections for voting because if you send a Satoshi to vote one way or send a Satoshi to another wallet to vote another way, that can't be interrupted. It can't be changed. So it is the ultimate truth. But it's very interesting you're talking about, the older generation that maybe they don't need Bitcoin as a financial tool or whatever, but maybe their grandkids or whatever. So it's kind of Bitcoin made me more responsible. I think it makes people more responsible, and so even an older generation, it could make them more responsible, where they might feel like, I'm going to be responsible for teaching this to my kids or teaching this to my grandkids. And when I think you came into Bitcoin in 2017, was it you said?
Yeah, I
Around
became
that?
aware of it.
Yeah,
2017
yeah. And
took me
so for me,
a while.
for me, it was 2021, I think, before I finally started really looking at it properly. But at that time, Bitcoin was like, there's so much FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt around Bitcoin. And anywhere you looked on the internet, like these big institutions, banks are saying, don't buy Bitcoin, it's a scam, it's bad. All these, these brokers and stuff and investment institutions, they're all telling you this is a scam. You're going to lose your money. Don't touch this with a barge pole. And all the talking heads saying, if I could short it, I would. And now it's been, widely accepted by banks, like you said, even central banks and these institutions. It's never been easier to understand and to learn about Bitcoin than right now today. But still, there is that kind of kickback where you're like the old system is incentivized for to warn people off Bitcoin because Bitcoin's going to replace it. Like um when we're born, we're just thrust into this system where this is the way the world is, and you have to exist within this system, whether it's, the political system or the financial system, whatever, the school system even. You're just that's the way it is, and this is how you're going to live your life. But if you laid both things out, um, for people and says, you have this system here with which is, advocating freedom and sovereignty, and you have this other system, nobody would choose the current system that we have. And we talk about the money being broken, and that's what I tell people too. But the actual financial system isn't broken because it's working exactly the way it was designed to work. It's designed to extract value from, the working class and the people at the bottom. It's designed to extract that value and to give it to those closest to the money printer, isn't it? Um,
Yeah, it's a system of control. Like it is, you can go down a lot of rabbit holes, but I think for me, from what I've realized, it's just purely a system of control. And as you say, it extracts from the working middle class through inflation, through taxes, to enrich those at the top, those that control the system, whoever those people may be. There's a lot of different concepts and theories, and well, are they theories now? They can be fact checked back throughout history, but it's I think it is again, most people don't think for themselves because they've been brought into this system. They expect to do things, or you're expected to do things a certain way, which you could tie back to schooling system, the way that everything's structured. You're designed and pushed towards this kind of group think and do as you're told type thing and all this kind of stuff. But I think from money as well, and I realized until you actually really think for yourself, like you got to question everything because the system is constantly manipulated. There's a manipulation, there's a lot of fraud goes on. You can see even there's published details about how bank fraud, the amount of money and fees that banks have paid out in the last few years purely because of fraud is, staggering. And you can fact check that online. But you need to think for yourself. And then when you do think for yourself and you've understood what Bitcoin is, you won't go anywhere else. That is the element of getting you free from this debt slavery that is the current system. Um, but if you come in hard, as you say, come in hard with this kind of concept to people from the outset, the natural reaction is the defenses go up, the barrier goes up where like, whoa, you're basically, really flipping my whole worldview currently because I've been brought up in this system. You know, invest in a pension, whatever it may be, stocks and shares. This is how I do things. This is how it's done. But even this week, yesterday, even today, with all these tariffs and everything, with the stock market, with what is happening currently, none of these things are safe. You cannot rely on any of this stuff to, preserve your wealth or create more wealth for you in the future. You can't expect the stock market to go up 8% year on year, the S&P 500, which is literally just propped up by about seven companies. Everything else is a zombie company. Um, but if you equate that to what's happening, monetary inflation, as in this empty money supply, is basically around about 8% a year, roughly 8 to 10%. The stock market is about 8 to 10% per year. So it's all being propped up because they're just creating more money that is just
Yeah,
filtering into these assets, and that's just increasing the perceived value of what it is. But when
yeah,
you want to extract that and from first principles identify what is real value, what is actual value, then that will lead you to Bitcoin. Um,
yeah,
it's the hard assets that hold the value. So, and when you have Bitcoin as the hardest asset that has ever been created, um, it doesn't take too much logic to work out where you want to go with your money and spend your time and
yeah,
energy. But it is like, it's so complex. The system's designed that way. I think the financial system's designed to be a complex web of just craziness. Like you have to go and work. You have to work your 9 to 5. You also have to become an expert stock picker to try to take the money you earn from your work to actually try to preserve that. Because it's this concept is again just listening to Michael Saylor in 2020 talking about the inflation rate or the hurdle rate of money, where if money inflates by 7%, if you're not giving yourself a 7% pay rise year on year, you're basically underwater. And in real terms, even house prices in real terms aren't actually rising. It's just inflation. It's
it's
just this
inflation.
concept of money supply. It takes more units of this currency to actually equate to what the value of your house is. So it's difficult to get your head around. It is, and like
Yeah,
I freely admit, prior to 2020, I knew nothing about money. I literally knew nothing. And that's, as you say, is quite tricky when you're trying to talk to your friends and especially your family about money. They look at you and they don't think, well, who's Alan to tell me what this is or what money is or why Bitcoin's important? I'd far rather go to my financial advisor down the road who's got some kind of qualification on Keynesian economics and take advice from them. And yeah, it's a difficult one, but it's just taking time to educate people. It's the education aspect of it,
yeah,
and also the pain that people are feeling, sort of making them go and take action to learn more about Bitcoin.
yeah.
But it takes time. It takes time.
100%, yeah. Yeah. And like you said, you're talking about the price of Bitcoin. Everybody kind of becomes interested when they see the price of coin going up. And but like you said, if you're at any Bitcoin conference or a meetup, nobody's really talking about the price because we understand that the price ha is the least interesting thing, and it isn't in any way related to the value of Bitcoin. And once you can see the value of Bitcoin, like my plan was a 4 year plan, and then it moved to a 10 year plan, and now I think about Bitcoin 1,000 years down the line. I'm thinking, what can people do in 1,000 years with Bitcoin? Because I know it's going to be there. It's going to be within my family tree or whatever for 1,000 years, and that's how far I'm thinking. So like it definitely does stop you from thinking about, how do I get to the weekend? What am I doing at the end of the month? What am I doing this year? And once sort of the pressure comes off a bit, you can just sit back and you can start to think about, what do I, if I'm going to retire early, what would I do with all that free time? Would I want to volunteer? Would I want to maybe start a charity? Would I want to teach guitar to kids? What would I move to another country? You start thinking about this and then you realize that, life should be about more than just working and coming home and working. And then you start to realize that, maybe you have these things that, maybe interests that you had when you were young. Like for me, it was like doing art and stuff. It's like, well, let's pick that back up, or maybe I'll write a book, or I'll I don't know, start a band. You just start thinking, what's possible to do with my life? I wasn't like people aren't, prior to me finding Bitcoin. Like I wasn't born to live that way. I wasn't in a financial cage, you know what I mean? That's not what life is about for me. And Bitcoin has allowed me to think further into the future, plan, and even doing stupid things like I done a skydive there one time, and then I was like, well, what else could I do? I was like, maybe I'll fly a plane. Why not? Maybe I'll buy a plane. So maybe in the future I'll buy a plane, so I'll do some flying lessons or whatever. I'll take up surfing. Just I have all these ideas of things that I want to do, and Bitcoin has changed me as a person and changed my whole mindset and how I view the world, And it can be difficult sometimes because you see people that are still in that, going around in the hamster wheel, and you try to talk to them about the future, and they're like, I have no time for that.
It's difficult because it is, as a Bitcoiner, you want to try to move all your time into Bitcoin, and it's hard
Yeah,
to do because obviously you still live in the fiat world as well. From your job, your salary generally is all fiat, debt-based money, and you need that. You need to work in that system. But the more and more you see, and it is the concept what you said there. Like, what is the most important thing in your life? It's time, and it's having time to do things that you enjoy and brings the best out of you as an individual. And when that happens for you, you bring the best out of yourself. It makes everybody else around you happier. It makes them feel more joyful. It gives them inspiration. It inspires your kids, to go and pursue different things. And I think that it's the symptom of what's happened in the point we're at in history where we're at right now. I think it's near peak suppression of creativity and suppression of human consciousness in many respects because we're just numb to having to go work in jobs. And let's be honest, most people hate their jobs. I think whatever stats there is, like the majority of people are just there to get paid a salary to really survive. And you have to live your life. You don't want to just live to survive. You want to do things. You want to experience things. You want to, create other things within your life. And that's what we're here for on this earth. And you're suppressed because of, again, the money system. Whereas we have this other system that really buys you back your time, and gives you that hope for the future and the ability to plan for the future. And it's a crazy thing when you go down that kind of rabbit hole and realize ultimately it's not having Bitcoin for the sake of having Bitcoin or having sats for having sats. It's having them for this time freedom that you really need in your life. Sure, again, when you go down the route as well, the amount of issues with, again, suicide rates, mental health crisis, all this stuff can be really brought back to broken financial system. The majority of the suicide rates are based around finances and pressures and financial stress. And it's heartbreaking to see, but Bitcoin is that tool that gets you away from that issue. And it really does free the mind and it frees your finances over time. It's not a get rich quick thing. Again, a lot of people come to me and say, well, Bitcoin's, whatever, 80,000, 100,000 now, it's far too expensive. And I don't think people grasp, well, they don't, what's actually happening and what's going to be happening with Bitcoin from a price perspective. But just having any small amount of Bitcoin will be probably dramatically, the impact that will have in your life in the future can't be kind of overestimated enough. And again, you can't predict the future, but the way Bitcoin is designed, the way it's built, it's tied to physics, tied to mathematics, tied to nature, tied to proof of work, and that's what really will prevail over time. And nobody gets a free lunch, as the term goes, but the way the system works for those people that control the money, they're just creating it at a whim. There's no proof of work going in there. There's no time expended. It's too easy. It's easy money. We need to
Yeah.
work off hard money, which is Bitcoin, and that's what
Yeah.
really empowers human flourishing and empowers really the betterment for everybody. It inspires people to grow, provide better services, products, and with the implementation of AI, how it's happening, what's happening with AI, Bitcoin is a requirement here, I think, to work alongside AI in order to allow that sort
Yeah.
of reduction in prices for everyone. That's effectively what it is. Technology should be increasing productivity. It's giving productivity gains for society, but those gains are being captured by the centralized system, and that's why prices are going up. Whereas with Bitcoin, it's a neutral money. It'll impose the free market to function. With AI, that will actually enhance and cause prices to fall for everybody. So that's what we need. We need prices to fall, and then that allows humanity to flourish better. So it's again, it's a complex web, but it's something that's developing. It's happening, and it's not a conspiracy. It's not a fictional thing. This is fact. This is actually over the course of the last 15, 16 years, Bitcoin's developed to where it is. It's an amazing thing to watch happening, but more and more people need to get on this train and realize what it is. So
Yeah.
it's just for the future, and again for your kids. It's an essential part of
Definitely.
my household, and that my wife is sick to death of me talking
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah.
But I think I've broken her after about 5 years. She's got to the point where she's realized, yes, this
Yeah.
is a thing. I need to
I
pay.
find I find myself so many times talking to my wife about different things that are going on with my family or her family or friends, whatever, or even just with workmates, and there's always a conversation about an issue, and so often I find myself, so now I just say it, but before I was like thinking it was like Bitcoin fixes this. You know what I mean? And there's such a wide range of different things, and I'm like, Bitcoin fixes this, and people are like, but how does Bitcoin fix this? You know what I mean? And it's just you talked about even mental health and suicide. Like, how can this magic internet money bring down the rates of suicide? You know what I mean? But like, we do say that fix the money, fix the world, and it's so true. And yeah, it's great. It's just understanding this. There's a bit of a shock where you're like you said, your world gets flipped upside down and you kind of gather yourself. But once you understand it and the dust settles, you're like, okay, now I know the rules of the game and I can play the game. And it becomes everything becomes so simplified because like the normal system that we have, we don't really understand it. We're paying taxes. Why are we paying tax? Most people think, why am I paying tax? And some people are saying it's illegal and you should never have to do that. And in the Bitcoin world, everything becomes so simple and so demystified, and it's great. But like you were saying, people don't need a lot of Bitcoin. They don't need a few sats, and a few sats. Like even I would say to people, buy like 50 quid's worth now. Just buy 50 quid, and in the future, maybe not, at come the end of your life, but for your kids, that will be worth so much more than 50 quid or whatever, or even 20. Just buy a little bit because people can't comprehend that in the future this will be worth so much more than it is today because it's kind of a foreign concept. We're just used to stuff going down in value, so we have to consume, consume, consume. But like today, we're lucky that you can just go into an exchange and you can just buy some Bitcoin. It's that easy. You have to, get your head around it if you're not good with technology or whatever. But it's as easy as going and going to a bureau and exchanging sterling for euro. It's easy to do. Um, and stealing Bitcoin's not really an option. People can't really steal Bitcoin that effectively. Well, it's happened before, but um, and then you can earn Bitcoin through your business. People can pay you in Bitcoin. That's that's the ways that people are going to get their hands on Bitcoin. But in the future, buying Bitcoin on an exchange is going to be very difficult, and so it's kind of a good thing as well because in that world, you're going to have to produce something of value to get Bitcoin. And everybody's going to have to produce something of value, and that's why the world becomes a better place because you're talking about a free lunch. There's too many people now getting fat off a free lunch and in the future that won't be possible. So that's the thing that I'm really excited about is people are going to have to find out, they're going to have the time to find out what they really love to do and what they're good at. And kids are going to be encouraged to do things that they enjoy doing, and they're not going to be, forced into, study this, study maths or whatever. And everybody's going to be happy because they're doing what they enjoy doing, and they're going to see that they're giving value to other people around them. So that inevitably is going to make them happy, make their friends happy, make their community happy. So it's just a win-win situation, isn't it? Um, in that world.
Yeah, Bitcoin really imposes or enforces that everybody has to work in service for everyone else as opposed to
Mm.
working to extract money from everybody else. So as you say, it'll get to the point in the future, maybe not in the too distant future, where there's not going to be any Bitcoin left on exchanges. It's going to be majority, purchased. As I say, it's a fixed supply asset. There's only so much. There's only 21 million that will ever be created or mined, and a lot of those, quite probably, what be 5 or 6 thousand of those have been lost, which really enforces the system even more. But the fact is, you're going to have to work for Bitcoin. You're going to have to do something or provide something of service or of value in order to receive Bitcoin for that, and which is the medium of exchange. But I think, yeah, it will take time. It'll be a slow grind potentially, but it's amazing when you see how Bitcoin is designed, and over time, over a longer period, it kind of enforces that, and it enforces the market to actually work in that where you will have to, exchange a service or a product or something of value to actually get some Bitcoin, as opposed to now we can go and use our fiat money, the money that we can earn through our day job, so to speak, and go and buy actual Bitcoin for that. Whereas, yeah, potentially 20, 30 years down the line, that might not be the case. So there's so many different layers to it. And there's so many things being built around and on top of Bitcoin as well, which is a whole different conversation. But yeah, things are just they're developing really quickly, and people just need to kind of just get a grasp of it. Don't sit on the sidelines and watch this unfold. This is for me, one of the most important creations or discoveries that humanity has, brought to life in the last 6,000 years potentially. Certainly, it's the first. Somebody said this is one of the first podcasts I listened to. It was one of Safadine's actually. I can't remember what episode it was, like 21 or it could have been 21. Actually, 20. I think it's 20. Episode 23. Don't hold me to that, but yeah, we're talking about accountancy. Bitcoin itself, the network, is the first advancement in accountancy in 700 years. And that is, it is now, it's triple entry accounting. All accounting was basically debits and credits. It was double entry accounting, whereas Bitcoin is audited every 10 minutes. So we've got triple entry accounting audited to inception, which is the first advancement in accounting in 700 years. So from an accounting point of view or a ledger technology point of view, that's quite astounding, similar to that of the printing press. So the creation of or the discovery, we call it, of Bitcoin and bringing that into, reality, and then what's being created on top of that, what that stems, what develops from that is really a whole new system of finance, which is again in service of everyone. But yeah, it's just it's taking it will take time. People have different predictions on price and this, that, and the other, but it's not something that really interests me. It's knowing what it is, how the technology works, what's being built on top of that. And again, what I'm seeing other people build within, again, decentralized systems within healthcare. I have issues with centralized healthcare systems, even from a computer point of view, database and things like that. There's so many things that Bitcoin then, folds into existence and brings into existence through different protocols built on top of Bitcoin. So it's the base layer of money in my mind. It's something that's, ossifying and galvanizing over time. And it's the most stable form of money that we've ever had. And when you build your society and your business on stable foundations, that's what you want. Currently, they're built on quicksand, or it's a
Mm.
house of cards that's collapsing, or quicksand that's really consuming everybody's souls, so to speak, financial souls, slowly
Uh,
over time through inflation. But Bitcoin gives you that escape.
that's brilliant. Consuming their souls, yeah. We won't
Well,
s- we won't we won't scare people off with that one, but at least it came
start the
towards the end.
podcast on that.
I was gonna say at least it came towards the end and not the start. But no, that's brilliant. So just checking the time there, and I think we'll wrap it up. That's brilliant. Thanks for coming on, and hopefully as well. We didn't even really get to talk that much about Emerge 21, but that's your podcast and your platform that you have with Chris McLaughlin. So maybe in the future we'll get you and Chris on together and we'll talk a bit more about that and how
Yeah,
you're helping
definitely.
small businesses and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be awesome. Yeah, we get Chris on certainly, and he's very, very knowledgeable about Bitcoin. He's written a book. Oh, hello. He's written a book. Oh, hello.